The first thing you would have seen was a Filipino man in a wrinkled gray t-shirt pinned against a door marked 2B, his breath coming fast as a police officer shoved a forearm into his chest. "Sir, I told you, you're done here," the officer barked. "You're leaving this property one way or another." Mail lay scattered on the hallway carpet, envelopes and a crumpled lease renewal notice. At the far end of the dim corridor, an older white couple watched with their mouths open, the man gripping a cane, the woman clutching her phone like she wasn't sure whether to call someone or start recording. To anyone walking past the open stairwell, it looked like a cop finally throwing out a stubborn squatter. No one knew that the man pressed to the door had just finished his night shift at the hospital. No one knew that his name was on the deed. His name was Jonas J. Villanueva, 34, Filipino American, ER nurse. He'd lived in apartment 2B for 6 years. It was the first place he'd ever rented in his own name when he moved from Manila, the first place he'd cooked sinigang on a tiny stove and cried quietly after his first brutal week in the ER. He loved this building, crooked floors and all. He knew every neighbor by name, from Mrs. Dudley on 3C who fed stray cats to the college kid upstairs who played guitar too loud. He never missed rent. He fixed light bulbs in the hallway when the old property manager forgot. A year ago, he'd even gotten a letter saying the building had been bought by a new company and that, if anything, they were planning renovations. So when he came home that afternoon, exhausted, and found a handwritten note taped to his door that said, in all caps, "You have 24 hours to vacate or I will call the police," he thought it was a bad joke. He'd barely finished reading it when the shouting started below. "Officer, up here!" a man's voice yelled from the stairwell. "He's still here, I told you!"
Jay stepped into the hall just as a stocky man in his 60s appeared with a police officer in tow. The man's name was Mr. Lawson. He owned the building years ago, before it changed hands. He still lived on the first floor and, in his head, still acted like he ran the place. "That's him," Lawson said, jabbing a finger at Jay. "The tenant I told you about. I sold this building and somehow no one told him his lease was up. I've got new buyers coming in. He's refusing to leave." Jay blinked. "That's not true," he said. "My lease is month to month with the new owner. I pay every month. I have receipts." Officer Daniels, tall and broad in his dark uniform, looked between them. "Sir," he said to Jay, "Mr. Lawson here says you've been told to vacate and are trespassing. Is that correct?" "No, it's not correct," Jay replied. His voice trembled, but he forced himself to stand straight. "I never got any legal notice, just that note." He held it up, the ballpoint letters shaky and angry. "This is the first time I hear anything." Lawson snorted. "He's lying. These people always play dumb when it's time to go. I told him last week his lease isn't valid anymore. I'm the owner. I can have him removed." Jay stared at him. "You're not the owner," he said quietly. "You sold this building last year. We all got the letter." Daniels frowned. "Mr. Lawson says he still holds title. You got any proof of a new owner?" Jay opened his mouth, then closed it. The letter was inside his apartment, in a folder with his pay stubs and immigration paperwork. He hadn't expected to need to carry it around like a shield. "It's in there," he said, nodding at the door behind him. "I can get it. You can come with me whatever you want, but please don't call me trespasser. This is my home." Lawson rolled his eyes. "You see what I mean?" he told the officer. "He's making up stories. I want him out, today. I'm not letting some guy who sneaked in on some visa technicality ruin my sale."
Before we continue the story, let me know what country you're watching from. Hit the like button if you love this story. And please, subscribe if you are new to my channel. Let's continue.
Jay felt the slap of those words even more than the hands on his chest. He'd waited 4 years for his green card, filled out every form, worked overtime, paid taxes on every cent he earned. Sneaked in? If only Lawson knew how many times Jay had fallen asleep on a bus, clutching his work bag like a life raft because he couldn't afford to miss a single shift. "Hey," Jay said, voice sharper now, "don't talk about me like that. I didn't sneak anywhere. I'm a nurse. I've treated your neighbors in the ER." Daniels moved in suddenly, closing the distance. "Watch your tone," he said. "You're already in enough trouble. You don't get to talk back." Before Jay can react, Daniels shoved him lightly enough to send him back against the door with a dull thud. Jay's breath whooshed out of him. "Officer," the woman at the end of the hall gasped, "is that really necessary?" "Ma'am, go back inside," Daniels said without looking at her. He planted a hand flat against Jay's chest, pinning him. "Here's how this works," he said, leaning in. "If the property owner tells me you're trespassing, I can remove you. You can argue about notices later. For now, you're leaving with me." Jay's heart pounded, fear and anger mixing in his throat. "You can't just evict me in the hallway. You need a court order, sheriff, something. I've read about this. You can't just throw people out." Daniel smirked. "Oh, you read about this?" he mocked. "You an expert now?" "I'm an expert in watching people die when they don't get help. That's what I do every night. And I know this isn't right." Lawson stepped closer. "I'm telling you, officer, he's making a scene because he knows he's caught. Look at him. He doesn't even look like he belongs here." The words "doesn't look like he belongs" landed like a weight in the narrow hallway. The older woman at the end of the hall flinched. The old man beside him shook his head slightly like he wanted to speak but didn't. Jay swallowed hard. "I pay rent every month. My name is on the checks. You can ask the new management company. They—" "Which management company?" snapped Daniels. "Got a name? Phone number?" Jay hesitated. He could picture the letterhead in his mind, something with Horizon Residential on it, a phone number he'd saved in his contacts, but his phone was in his pocket and any movement might be taken as resisting. "Sir," he said carefully, "my phone is in my pocket. I can show you the emails, the payments. Please don't push me. I'm not trying to run away." Daniel's grip tightened. "You're not moving until I tell you to," he said. "If you're legit, they can straighten it out later. Right now, you're leaving with me." He reached for his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 14. I've got one non-compliant tenant refusing to vacate at 312 Oakwood. Go ahead and start a unit for transport." The elevator dinged. All 3 men turned. The door slid open to reveal a woman in a navy blazer and slacks, carrying a leather folio. Filipina, early 40s, hair pulled into a low bun, expression sharp from a long day. Her heels clicked on the hallway floor as she stepped out. She took in the scene in a second. The officer pinning Jay, the scattered mail, Lawson puffed up with self-importance, the frightened neighbors. Her gaze hardened. "What is going on in my building?" she said, voice cool and precise. "Oh, good, you're here. Mr. Lawson," said Lawson officer. "This is Miss Rivera, my realtor. The buyers are very concerned about this tenant. We're trying to get him out." She cut him off with a small, incredulous laugh. "Your building?" she repeated. "Mr. Lawson, you sold this building to my company 11 months ago. I'm not your realtor. I'm your former buyer." She looked at Jay. "Jonas, that's you, right? From 2B?" Jay stared, blinking. He recognized her now. She was the woman who'd walked through with contractors months ago, asking about plumbing and fire escapes. He'd assumed she was some kind of inspector. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "I'm Jonas. I live here." "Not according to your friend here," Daniels muttered, but his grip eased a fraction. Miss Rivera opened her folio, pulled out a set of papers with practiced ease, and held them up for Daniels to see. "Officer," she said, "my name is Attorney Maria Rivera. I'm also the managing partner of Oakwood Homes, LLC. She tapped the top page. "This is the deed, filed with the county clerk. Oakwood Homes owns this property, not Mr. Lawson. Not anymore." Daniel's eyes flicked over the document. Legal descriptions, signatures, the date from almost a year ago. "And these," she continued, sliding out another set of pages, "are the current leases, including apartment 2B. Jonas Villanriva has been a tenant in good standing since before we purchased the building. Here's his payment history." She turned another sheet. "Never late, not once." The hallway seemed to tilt. Lawson's face went red. "That's not
I thought, he sputtered. They told me I could still oversee things. They told you nothing of the sort, Rivera said sharply. We sent you multiple letters after closing, reminding you that you are now a tenant in 1A, not the landlord of anything. Instead of enjoying retirement, you've been harassing my residents. She turned back to Daniels, her voice cooling again. And you've been helping him. Daniels swallowed. His hand dropped fully from Jay's chest. I responded to a call from a property owner. He said... He lied, Rivera said flatly. And even if he hadn't, you know very well you can't perform a summary eviction in the hallway based on someone's word. No court order, no sheriff, no notice, just a brown man and a story. And that was enough? The older woman at the end of the hall dropped her gaze. The man beside her let out a slow breath. Daniels opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked at Jay, really looked this time. The hospital badge still clipped to his scrubs under the t-shirt, the deep fatigue in his eyes, the steady way he'd kept his voice from shaking. I may have acted prematurely, Daniels admitted, the words rough. I should have verified ownership first. You think? Rivera said. You put your hands on my tenant in his home based on a man who doesn't even own the building anymore. Lawson bristled. Now wait just a minute, he started. This is all a big misunderstanding. I was just trying to protect my investment. You have no investment. You sold it. You cashed the check. The only thing you're protecting is your pride. She turned back to Jay, her expression softening. Mr. Villanueva, are you okay? Do you need medical attention? I know you just got off shift. Jay let out a breath he felt like he'd been holding since the push. I'm okay, he said, just shaken. Rivera nodded. You have every right to be. After this, we'll talk about formally documenting what happened. I'm sure Internal Affairs will want to see it too. Daniels winced. Ma'am, I am sorry, he said, looking at Jay. I shouldn't have grabbed you like that. I let the call and Mr. Lawson's information get ahead of what I actually knew. That's on me. Jay studied him. The anger was still there, but now it sat next to something else. A tired understanding that this wouldn't be the last time someone looked at him and saw the wrong story. I appreciate the apology, he said quietly, but I need you to remember this next time someone calls you about a suspicious tenant who happens to look like me. Ask for papers, ask for proof. Don't start with your hands. Daniels nodded, shame burning in his chest. You're right, he said. I will. Rivera slipped the lease copy back into her folder. For the record, she added, looking around the hallway, Jonas is exactly the kind of tenant any owner would be lucky to have. He helps his neighbors, he pays on time, and as long as I own this building, he's not going anywhere unless he chooses to. The older woman at the end of the hall finally spoke up. We know, she said softly. He helped my husband when he fell last winter. I should have said something sooner. Jay gave her a tired smile. It's okay, he said. You're saying something now. As Daniels and Lawson retreated down the stairs, one weighed down by regret, the other by the sudden realization that his word no longer ruled the building, the hallway slowly relaxed. The scattered mail was gathered, the neighbors slipped back into their apartments. The security camera at the end of the ceiling blinked its tiny red light, recording everything. Later that week, there would be meetings and reports, calls from the department, a formal complaint filed by Attorney Rivera on behalf of Oakwood Homes and Jonas Villanueva. Lawson would receive a written notice reminding him of his actual status, tenant, not landlord. The police department would quietly schedule Daniels for additional training. But that night, after the door to 2B finally closed, Jonas leaned his head against it and listened to the silence of his apartment. His couch where he'd fallen asleep 100 times after shifts, his small kitchen, the framed photo of his parents back in Manila. He thought about how in one afternoon he'd gone from tenant in good standing to trespasser in the eyes of a stranger with a badge, all because another man couldn't accept that the building wasn't his anymore. And he thought about how quickly that changed the moment the true owner walked in. Ownership, he realized, wasn't always about whose name was on the deed. It was also about who people believed, whose voice carried weight, whose story was assumed true. Today, for once, the story had turned in his favor. He hoped the next time someone like him stood in a hallway with a cop's hand on his chest, the officer would remember 312 Oakwood, apartment 2B, and think twice before deciding who really belonged.
Thank you for watching to our Badge and Justice stories. If you want to watch more stories like this, click the videos above. See you again tomorrow.